At the dawn of the 20th century, Kazakhstan stood at a crossroads. For centuries, the Great Steppe had been a symbol of freedom, where nomads followed their herds beneath endless skies. Should it only be the season and the rhythm of nature? But this world was changing. The Russian Empire had already drawn its borders deep into the steppe. Military fortresses, postal roads, and settler villages began to spread across Kazakhland. What had once been open pastures became numbered plots on imperial maps. Under colonial rule, land was declared the property of the state. Kazakh families now had to pay for the right to use their own soil. The taxes, paperwork, and new laws replaced the unwritten rules of the nomads. Old maps and documents in the museum show this transformation clearly. Vast territories marked with new Russian names, while Kazakh houses were pushed farther away from fertile rivers and trade routes. This was more than the loss of land. It was the beginning of a struggle for identity. From this moment, every family, every tribe faced a difficult choice: to adapt or to resist.
The colonial economy reshaped every part of life on the steppe, where once there were self-sufficient nomads. There were no dependent workers. Trade routes were redirected towards Russian markets and the value of livestock. The heart of the Kazakh economy began to fall. Settlers arrived from distant regions of the empire. They plowed fields where herds once grazed, and soon the most fertile lands near rivers and lakes were taken. Kazakh herders had to move farther into dry steppe zones, where survival was harder and profit smaller. Markets appeared in towns like Akmolinsk and Petropavlovsk. For the first time, Kazakhs had to pay taxes in money, not cattle. Many sold their herds and became workers, guards, transporters, and builders.
The empire control was not only economic, it was political. Every aspect of life was under supervision: land, taxes, even personal movement. When the First World War began, everything worsened. Sons of Kazakh men were taken to work in labor battalions, building roads, bridges, and railways for the Russian army. They were promised payment, but most revised nothing. Families were left behind without men, without food, and without hope. In the summer of 1916, despair turned into rebellion from Turgay to Semirchi. Kazakh rose up against injustice. It was not only about conscription, it was about dignity and survival. Weapons, leather, and uniforms preserved in this museum remind us of that painful yet proud moment in our history. The uprising was brutally suppressed, but it became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even in oppression, the spirit of freedom cannot be broken. Even after the defeat, people continued to dream of a better future, a life where their land and culture would belong to them again.
After the uprising, the empire took control again. New technologies appeared: railways, telegraph lines, steam engines for the empire. This meant progress for local people. They showed that the steppe was no longer theirs. The railways across Kazakhstan brought not freedom but loss. Grain, livestock, and mineral were sent north to the empire, while poverty and dependence stayed here. Telegraph lines and typewriters, tools of new rule, spread the Russian language and government across the land. Each message sent through them reminded people that decisions about their home were made far away. Models of trains and old communication tools in this museum show that industrial time when Kazakhstan became a supplier of rough materials for others. Factories and stations appeared, but locals had little power. They worked long hours in hard conditions, earning only enough to live. This new system brought progress for some, but for most Kazakhs, it made life harder and took them further from their traditions.
As life changed, so did tradition. The rhythm of the steppe, once guided by the season and herds, was slowly replaced by the rhythm of city life. Many Kazakh families moved closer to towns like Akmolings, attracted by new jobs in factories and offices. Children began attending Russian language schools, where they studied subjects and read books that were completely new to their parents. Old songs, stories, and craft, the voice of the steppe began to fade away, but traces of that heritage still remained in everyday life, in how people dressed, spoke, and celebrated. Photographs from early 20th century Akmolings show this transformation clearly. Classrooms are filled with children learning a new language and new rules of life.
Even in this time of control, a new hope began to rise. From the shadows of repressions, a generation of educated Kazakh youth migrated. They studied in Omsk, Petersburg, and Kazan, learning about law, politics, and the right of nation. They saw the injustice of colonial life and decided to act. They believed that the Kazakh nation deserved autonomy, justice, and education. This dream took shape a large movement. Through newspapers like Kazakh, they spread their message, calling for schools in the Kazakh language, fair land distribution, and self-governance. The leaders of Alash, Bukikhanov, Batursunov, Dulatov weren't soldiers, but thinkers who fought this with words, not weapons. Here in museum, you can see their properties, books, and the newspapers. These documents remind us that the struggle for independence began long before 1991. Even though the Alash Orda government was later dissolved, their dream never disappeared. It lived on in the hearts of the people. Their courage shaped the idea of modern Kazakhstan. They provided that even under colonial rule, our national spirit remained unbroken.
The story of Kazakhstan in the early 20th century is not just about suffering, it is about endurance, courage, and hope. From nomadic freedom to colonial hardship, our ancestors never give up.
These artifacts, weapons, maps, letters, and photographs remind us of who we are and what we came through.